Have you wondered why my line art always look worse than my sketch? How can my sketch looks like a masterpiece, but my line art looks like my crooked back?
Oh, my back!
I have struggled with line art for a long time. I learned a lot out of failing and experimenting. And today I want to give you some of my advice to not ruin your line art. You might have drawn the line art on top of the sketch, and when you turn off the sketch layer, poof, your line art is now worse than it looked before, when the sketch was visible. I have encountered this a lot of time, and I think the reason behind it is because the sketch influences the way the line work looks. So, what is the solution? Well, you can always turn down the opacity down, so you don't kinda confuse the line work with the sketch. Usually, I turn it below 20%. You can even change the color of the sketch, like red or blue or any color besides black, I guess. By the way, don't forget to draw your line art on a different layer. No. Don't try to fix your sketch. Well, Psycho, what does that mean? Look at this one, for example. See, the line work turns out too stiff. I usually try to fix my sketch during the line work phase, especially if some things look off anatomically. But more often than not, I end up with a worse looking result. The reason is simple. In the pursuit of correcting the sketch, I sacrificed the energy that was already there. The sketch may not have been perfect, but it carried the motion, rhythm, and when I try to fix it with careful corrective lines, I often contradict the natural direction of the energy and the pose, and the drawing loses its flow. This ties directly into gesture drawing. The whole point of gesture drawing is to capture the movement, the weight, and the energy of the pose. It's not about being anatomically correct or to get everything right. If you overwrite your sketch with stiff, overly cautioned lines, you just end up killing the essence of the pose. So, in conclusion, I guess you should think of your sketch like a base of your drawing, and even if your anatomy is not perfect, don't try to fix it. It's the rhythm that makes the figure feel alive. There is a problem with this sketch. You might only notice it when you start your line work. Where should my lines go? The sketch is too messy to answer this question. Although it might not be a big problem before you start drawing, because our mind is too good at recognizing patterns, even if it's very messy or incomplete. It literally fills the places even if there is nothing. But this perception of mind doesn't always apply to your hand movements, sadly. So when you start the line art and you start pointing down these kind of lines, you start to notice the gap between your knowledge and your perception. So you will end up with worse line art than you imagined. Now, what should we do? Well, I usually just clean up my sketch. You have already the sketch. I just use the eraser and pen to clean up the sketch, or you just can draw a more neater sketch from ground up if you want to. A refined sketch doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be readable enough that your line work can follow the flow instead of getting lost in the noise. I think line art without any variation in line weight can look a bit boring. One way to make your line art more interesting is by playing with line weight. But where should lines get thicker? Well, remember, lines don't actually exist in real world. So the answer really depends on the artist. Personally, I thicken my lines in the shadowed areas where two objects meet, or sometimes around the entire shape. I also like to add thickness on curves, and if a drawing feels too crowded, I bold the lines around the object I want to stand out. That said, using line weight is optional. You can make great art without using it, just like in the most anime you watch. I even made one drawing with only monoline, and I think it turned out pretty great. Still, I really like using line weight. The only downside is that it takes a lot of time out of me, thanks to my perfectionism, which brings me to the next point. When I draw line art, I often get lost trying to make it perfect, especially back when I drew with my fingers. Yeah, I drew with my fingers. Seeing other artists' flawless looking line art used to push me into obsessing over every tiny pixel. I'd zoom in hunting for imperfection to fix, but that was exhausting. And honestly, most line art that looks perfect isn't flawless at all. It just hides its imperfection well. Personally, I've grown to like those little flaws. Sometimes art that's too perfect can actually feel a bit lifeless. You can't just skip line work entirely. Lately, that's what I've been doing. Even though my sketches aren't super clean, I don't always have the energy to trace the whole thing. So I just erase a few lines and call it a day. Remember, lines don't really exist in real world, as I said it before. So you don't have to use them in your art. Some artists go straight from sketch to carving out forms. And honestly, that's completely valid. In art, nothing is really off limits. Unless you're using I guess. And with that, go make some messy lines, break some rules, and most importantly, have fun with it. See you in the next one. Peace.